I welcome the development of a position paper on public procurement reform in South Africa by PARI as part of its broader project to contribute to the development of an overarching strategy for state reform. I think PARI is absolutely correct in recognizing public procurement as one of the key areas to focus attention if we are intent on repositioning the South African administration in a post-state capture context. There can be little doubt, as the position paper also clearly illustrates, that public procurement is an important driver of development in South Africa. However, it is also clear that our procurement system is not particularly healthy, and this is not just a matter of corruption or state capture. Public procurement in South Africa faces very serious systemic problems that are undermining its potential as a developmental tool. Unless we find solutions to these problems, we will continue to spend vast amounts of public funds with little to show for it by way of development. I broadly welcome the proposals set out in the PARI position paper of the reforms that should be introduced into the South African procurement system. I think they broadly capture the main concerns that currently stand in the way of moving us forward. I also fully agree with the position paper that we shouldn't be fixating on immediately coming up with a perfect system and trying to exhaustively and definitively identify all the problems and find solutions to them. As the paper states, evidence gathering about what works is interwoven with implementation, so that reform should be an ongoing, iterative and dynamic process. I'm certainly in favor of such an approach to procurement reform in South Africa. At the same time, there are certain key prerequisites that must be put in place to even embark on any process of meaningful reform. I think current experience in public procurement in South Africa is showing us how the absence of such key interventions at the outset can undermine any meaningful reform. In my view, the current approach to regulating the procurement system is a perfect example. There's broad agreement that many aspects of public procurement are simply not working and that integrity in procurement is low in many dimensions of the system. In recognizing this defect, National Treasury created the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, the OCPO, with a mandate, amongst others, to guide procurement practices and to intervene where things are not as they should be. That is, to reform the system. However, in the absence of appropriate regulatory tools to do this work, the OCPO has generated dozens of instructions and frameworks and standards and guidelines, and this has simply not been useful. In fact, I would suggest that it has further undermined the system by increasingly ossifying procurement and an ever-growing tangle of rules of increasing rigidity linked to an increasing compliance culture. And none of this has really facilitated innovative and strategically sensible purchasing. What we thus need as a point of departure is a radically different organizational framework within which an appropriate procurement system can be developed, and to have this, we need a solid statutory foundation, drawing on the constitutional principles of public procurement found in Section 217. I think the position paper is really helpful in opening up debate about this essential first step towards meaningful procurement reform. I think it is important to emphasize that this is just a starting point in the process of reform. This is not the reform itself. Once we have an appropriate organizational framework and clear principles, we can start to work out the detail of the development-oriented procurement system that we desperately need in South Africa. I think the analysis and proposals put forward in the PARI paper are thus all extremely valuable in deepening public debate about the kind of system we need. The issues raised in the paper are all critical, such as open contract data, professionalization of procurement officials, the consolidated regulatory framework, the appropriate organizational structures, the nature of our approach to procurement, and better enforcement mechanisms. On professionalization in particular, I cannot agree more. There's clearly a woeful deficit in public procurement capacity and professionalization in South Africa, as well as opportunities to develop these shortages. Addressing this must be very high on our list of reform priorities. PARI's proposals on a consolidated regulatory framework are quite interesting, especially given the recent publication of the long-awaited draft public procurement bill for public comment. I hope that the position paper will also contribute to real public engagement with the draft bill. I'm less enthusiastic about some of the organizational proposals put forward in the position paper. I think there's a tension between, on the one hand, arguing for a regulatory body on public procurement situated in National Treasury, and on the other hand, arguing for breaking out of the restrictive public finance management paradigm of public procurement that is characteristic of our current system. I don't think one can have both of those. I thus think in strongly supporting the latter objective, that is moving public procurement out of its current public finance management straitjacket into a more strategic function, that a new regulatory body should not be situated within Treasury or any other department for that matter. Procurement is a cross-cutting function, and that should be reflected at the highest level in the organizational setup of the national regulator. To its credit, the position paper does recognize contestation on its organizational proposals regarding the OCPO. I commend PARI for driving this reform agenda, and in particular for recognizing the important role of procurement in state reform in South Africa. I look forward to engaging in increasing public debate on these critical issues.